Hello, everybody. I am the Proactive Caregiver, and I specialize in educating others on how to be proactive by empowering you, the caregiver. Because if you cannot take care of yourself, then you cannot take care of your loved one. Learn this all so many different ways. So today, I want to talk to you about caregiver nutrition, especially how it affects our seniors. We gain so many habits over childhood. Marketing trends, family resources of what's available and what's not, and even sometimes school lunches. It's hard to know, but I don't know about you. For me, as I've gotten older, I've had to unlearn some of those habits, and I've had to readjust how I help my gut, which helps my heart and my brain. Something I would have never considered before until I became a caregiver. This past fall, I attended a meeting at the local aging council services, and hearing the information, it just rang so many bells for me, and the light went on all over the place because it was more confirmation in a different format that reminded me why I do need to readjust my habits. And it also gave me some of that insight as to things I noticed with my mom that I could have done, should have done, past the point, but I want to help you while you're in this moment. So I asked Shauna Marcos if she would join me today and share the information that she shared that day. Shauna is the Chief Strategy and Impact Officer for Meals on Wheels of Central Texas. She brings over 15 years of experience in the public health in the nonprofit sector, specifically working with older adults and neighbors with disabilities in Central Texas. Shauna drives the organization's overall strategy, initiatives, and the continuous quality improvement evaluation processes to basically demonstrate measured impact on both the operational side and the outcomes of the programs. Shauna has a Master of Science in Human Nutrition from Texas State University. She's also a licensed and registered dietitian nutritionist. She and her colleagues were published in the Journal of Nutrition, Health, and Aging under the article Impact of Home Delivered Meals on Nutrition Status Among Older Adults in Central Texas. And she was also in the journal with working with older people under Addressing Loneliness and Isolation Through Client Volunteer Interaction. Shauna has been honored for her commitment to the ideals of scholarship, leadership, and services by the National Society of Collegiate Scholars. And she's also received awards for innovations in dietetics practice and education by the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, as well as in leadership, research, and academic excellence. I am so excited for her to be here with me today because this information is so important. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
This is wonderful because I myself struggle with nutrition. I have come to have this love-hate relationship with food and calorie counting and all of this. But I know I have time to practice and get it right, or at least better. But there are some things I had to unlearn. So when I was able to attend last fall, it was fascinating to understand the difference in nutrition for me now versus nutrition for our loved ones, our seniors that we care for. Can you give us a little bit of an insight into how older adults change with their needs nutritionally as time goes on?
Absolutely. That is probably one of the most important things to realize and for everyone to understand, because regardless of socioeconomic status, regardless of how many resources we have or where we live or what have you, we all, as we age, experience natural physiological changes that impact our risk for poor nutrition status, which means basically malnutrition, etc. So some of those things that happen are as we get older, our taste and smell diminish. We kind of get dry mouth, have difficulty swallowing. And when we get older, we're usually on a few medications, whether it's prescriptive or over the counter. And you don't have to be on I think it's maybe 3 or more, and it's already considered polypharmacy. And we all know that these medications have side effects, and some of those are dry mouth, decreased sense of smell and taste. And so when you have a sinus infection and you can't taste your food, you don't want to eat.
Right.
So when that is your daily experience with food as an older adult, food isn't enjoyable anymore.
Right.
We also experience hormone changes as far as satiety and hunger hormones go.
Right.
So there's one known as CCK, cystokinin. Sorry, okay. You can like bleep that one out, you know. CCK is what I called it forever, but it's a satiety hormone, and satiety means feeling full. So as we get older, our body actually upregulates that. So we secrete more of that hormone, so we feel fuller, faster, longer, so we aren't hungry as much. And that concept is known in the literature as the anorexia of aging, because naturally as we're getting older, we're not wanting to eat. You couple this with all these physiological aspects that have happened that don't make it pleasurable. Then once you couple that with social, emotional aspects, it only exacerbates the situation. So we may not enjoy eating anymore because the lack of pleasure, but we're also maybe suffering from bereavement or loss of a loved one.
Yes, I can relate to that.
So maybe your appetite decreased as you were in mourning from your mother.
Yes, absolutely.
If we are of a lower socioeconomic status, there's less resources. And typically people of color live in areas that there's a lot more food deserts, there's a lot less access to healthcare and things of that nature. So they typically are more at risk. But that kind of in a nutshell is kind of things that happen, as we get older, whether it's naturally or from our circumstances. But I think probably one of the biggest ones that stands out to me that threatens older adults' independent living. And we all want to live independently and with dignity for as long as possible. And one of the biggest things is the loss of lean muscle mass as we age. And very specifically, it starts when we hit 40. We automatically, naturally, it doesn't matter who you are in this world, but once you hit 40, it is a natural process where we start to lose muscle mass. And why is that important? So some of the obvious factors might be, strength and mobility and making sure that we are not putting ourselves at risk for falling and things of that nature. Right. And that is absolutely true. But even more so, our protein stores are our muscles, and our immune system and all of our immune cells are built off of those proteins. So if we're not consuming enough, then our body's going to start taking from our muscle stores. So when you think of all those factors that may make an older adult not eat as much, reduce their intake for whatever that reason is, they're not getting enough protein unless they know this and are focusing on it or have a caregiver that is aware of this. Right?
Exactly.
Because you can work around these things to do your best, but it will just be, exacerbate the situation.
Well, and if caregivers aren't aware of this, what I hear is, they just don't have the energy, or they didn't nap so they're tired, or we reason things out, we normalize it when it really is something that could be food related, energy related in that way. I know that when I was grieving and I didn't have the appetite and I wasn't eating enough, I started feeling cramps in my legs on the side of my thighs, and I thought, I've never felt that pain before. But now I understand, based on the lack of calories I was getting, I was causing some problems in my own body that I needed to bounce back.
Even in addition to protein, there's some nutrients, musculoskeletal nutrients, that really help with muscle strength. The nutrients from our food do so many magical things in the body. But yes, so it's if you're not eating overall because of bereavement and things of that, you're missing the protein and the nutrients that are helping your muscles maintain.
Right. Yeah. And another area that I think caregivers don't notice or recognize is that when they start to have to help their loved ones with the transference, that was an area I noticed my mom getting her up and from the couch to go to the bathroom. And after being on the commode for a while, getting up and walking, that strength was gone.
Yes. Yes, activities of daily living. So when older adults start having trouble with that, that becomes very difficult mobility wise and taking care of ourselves. But yeah, and that lean muscle loss can also impact not only the poor immune system, but if we have wounds, we will not heal as quickly. If we get the flu or a cold, we're not going to bounce back as quickly. So you can see how just that loss in lean muscle mass really can impact our health, and much quicker than if we were able to, number one, get enough dietary protein. And that need actually increases as we age. Older adults need more protein than we do in our younger years. And that shocks a lot of people when I tell them that.
It does.
Because we do need less calories as we age.
And that's the confusion.
But more nutrients, and the specific ones are protein, which in our country, like, we don't have a hard time getting enough protein most of the time. But as we get older, with all those factors I mentioned, also chewing problems, difficulties, I find that the current older adult generation, they associate protein with what food source? Meat. And meat can be not only
tough sometimes.
Yes. And so they're not going to want to chew as much if they've got all these chewing or denture issues or trouble swallowing. So that's when we need to understand as caretakers that protein comes in a variety of sources. And if meat is something that individuals really like, choose those ground meats. Those are already softer.
Right.
There's chewing or swallowing issues. And then there's some plant-based proteins, which are really great to have.
Yes.
So, canned beans is one of my favorite canned product because you can drain it and rinse it. It rinses away most of the sodium. And it's a really wholesome, good protein source that's vegetarian and plant-based, but also loaded with soluble fiber, so it fills your gut faster, and then you're more satiated in a good way. So it just helps with a lot of things. And then loaded with nutrients, of course.
Yeah. Of course. Well, I'm feeling full, and because you've had nutrients, not feeling full because you're not having the hormone to say, hey, you're hungry.
Right.
This is the challenge of what's good protein, what's bad protein, how much protein. And this is something I'm still having to learn.
Yeah.
How much I'm getting every day. So the idea of muscle and trying to work out and have energy and exercise, it's just the caregiver that's running themselves ragged and barely grabbing stuff on the go. And then they're trying to give to their loved ones, and their loved ones don't want the food that's being prepared. I know that could be frustrating, but figuring out what it is they can consume the protein from. Right.
So if that loved one is not wanting to really eat what's in front of, are we talking about the loved one or the caretaker? The loved one.
Both at this point.
Well, let's talk about the loved one, because if it's
More
sometimes
so the loved one, yes.
Odors are off-putting as people get older. Doing more cold foods, because those molecules are not as
expensive.
Yes. So that's one strategy. And then if they're not consuming very much, they might take a couple bites. Then we need to start thinking, okay, how do we increase the calories and protein per bite? So it's not looking at the volume of food they're eating. It's looking at, in those 2 or 3 spoonfuls, how can I get the most to them? And so, for example, if breakfast is oatmeal, if lactose intolerance is not a problem, I would instead of with water, I would use milk. If unintentional weight loss is a thing, then you want to go with whole milk. So some of the dietary advice that is, more related to, heart health later on and preventing diabetes and things like that is incredibly valid advice. So if we're looking, but when we're older and we have to, what's more the priority here? And so when an older adult is not eating as much, they eat less, and you're starting to notice weight loss, and they're without wanting to, and even if they were wanting to, they're not just going to lose fat tissue, they're losing muscle and bone tissue. So frailty just really will start to set in addition to all those other problems. But a way to increase calories and protein per bite is, so what is it that they really love to eat? And hopefully, peanut butter is a great thing to stir into that oatmeal. Let me go back to the oatmeal.
Oh, wow.
Because if you have milk, you got 8 grams of protein in that if it's a cup,
True.
And of course, other great nutrients, calcium and vitamin D and all those good things.
Mm-hmm.
Stir in a tablespoon of peanut butter.
Thicken it up.
And that adds protein and healthy fat. So, and it's that's going to increase the calories per bite big time.
It'll also increase flavor.
Oh, and it's good. Yeah. Honestly, that's a good weight management thing too, because if, so even for the caregiver, if you're having oatmeal or some, when my mother has oatmeal, she's a 74-year-old woman, and I say these things all the time, but I can't convince everybody. But they did start to make their oatmeal with milk because milk does not bother them. So that's good. But trying to get them to stir in that peanut butter and think of it that way, add a little bit of fruit, because again, I'm focusing on protein right now because of functionality and aging.
Right.
But let's not forget that array of the rainbow of fruits and vegetables, all the colors. So if it's beans, the black beans, we want black, white, and brown in that rainbow too, because all plant foods, those different colors represent different phytochemical antioxidant groups, and they fight disease in different pathways on the same disease. It's really amazing. It's really amazing. I loved nutrition biochemistry for that reason. Really made me a believer that food is thy medicine, and that's an example. It works better in the preventative realm than in a treatment realm.
Yes, because by the time we're getting to that treatment part, I'm trying to help my mother after the fact. It seemed like everything I did was just so frustrating because I just wanted to help her eat, help her have less pain, because the bowel movement, trying to get more fiber into her diet.
Yes.
But it was a battle getting the meat, the fiber, the fluids, the water into her system so the system would work together.
It is hard. This is not an easy challenge that we all have in front of us at all.
No, and that's why if you know, and this is what I've learned, that the more we know, just like my Angelo said, the more you know, the better we do. And so knowing the source of protein, knowing the calorie count or the nutrient count more so.
You know what? That's a good point. So what I love so we have to follow guidelines as we provide our medically tailored meals, and just as dietitian nutritionists as we plan things for the public and provide guidance. It's harder for people to follow specific nutrients and numbers in that, right? Yes. Because what do we eat? We don't eat nutrients, we eat food.
Exactly.
So the dietary guidelines for Americans is my favorite place to go for that because it's very food-based. So what I would recommend, so first let me list off some good protein sources because I haven't been comprehensive. So everybody knows that animal meats are definitely there. You want to go with leaner cuts if you can.
Of course.
So if it's a red meat or a pork, loin, anything with the word loin in it or round is the leanest cut. You can have the same cuts of ribeye and a sirloin, and there's a 400 calorie difference.
Wow.
And that difference is all in saturated fat, which is not the best for the heart. Not taste good, but Right. So we can still find these tweaks where we can still enjoy some of those foods that we want. But that's meat. So you got the ground meat as well, right? Go for the lean. But eggs are awesome. Excellent source. The peanut butters, any nut butters you want. And then if there's low income aspects, money is a problem. We need things a little more shelf stable. The canned tuna, great source of omega-3s. And then canned chicken, you can use those and put them in soups. So you can mix, you can get it. So if you get a canned soup, get low sodium. To me, they never have enough of the vegetables or they never have enough of the protein, whatever they're promoting.
Right.
So I advise our clients, find your favorite soup, try to get low sodium if you can, get a can of carrots, get a can of chicken, and add the ratio you want just to boost that nutrient composition in that soup.
It's a great idea.
And that's really good for caregivers because we don't realize every bite that we eat, we want to make sure that it's powerful in nutrients, and it goes a long way.
Thank you for saying that because in my lessons of learning how to eat better and boosting all of my nutrients, I focus on the calorie. I'm supposed to get 1,400 calories. It's really hard to understand, to see what does 1,400 calories a day look like? And then breaking that down by meal. And I go over every time and I get frustrated. So I can imagine when we put a plate of food in front of our loved one and it's the meat, vegetable, starch, and they're looking at it and they maybe have a bite of each or 2 or 3 bites of the vegetable because that's made, I don't know if that's their favorite or softer food to eat. And then it's the push back and push away.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the caregiver's stressed because now I'm not getting food into my loved one, but the person who's supposed to be getting that nutrients, it's like, well, they don't look at it as a calorie count. They're just looking at it as what tastes good.
Yeah, or when they just, food begins to turn them off after a little bit. They just don't want any more.
And that's the challenge.
Yeah.
That is the challenge as time goes on, to just say, okay, let's not get frustrated. Mm-hmm. It's going back to like our little ones when they come to the table. Right. How much do we get into them? And if they're eating on the fly.
And maybe that advice is, so for children and when they're learning to eat 0 to 5, well, once they're eating solids, the responsibility of the caretaker is what's provided, and the child decides how much. So, I mean, that's the concept in the literature. That is the best evidence-based approach that we know right now. So I think as a caregiver, I think if you're proud in what you're offering, just be happy with that. But I would have a plan B. Let's think of how else can we bump up nutrients and protein and calories in our loved one. Smoothies are a great way.
Absolutely.
And so if you get variety of frozen fruits, get a good protein powder, most of like vanilla, and they taste. You can get plant-based protein powders that are really good too if you want to do that. And you can scoop those nuts in there. You can do all these things, and honestly, a little bit goes a long way. So there's some tweaks to that. Timing of protein, I think breakfast. So when instead of focusing on calories and stuff, let's focus on, all right, for breakfast, that's usually the time of day people don't get enough protein at all. The breakfast foods we typically choose are pretty devoid of protein, unless you're eating, but even if you have, you'd have to have 2 eggs every day. That's like 14 grams. We want to try to get to 15 to 20 in a meal.
Interesting.
So when I looked at my, if I knew then what I know now, was my grandmother was aging and she's no longer with us, and that was a while back, but she'd have a black cup of coffee and a dry piece of toast. Yes. Does that sound familiar?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So that still works, but let's spread some peanut butter on that toast.
Yeah.
Maybe
have 2 slices of toast.
Put some honey on there. So to me, like, as we get older, like, eating is also about life enhancement. Yes. We want to make sure nutrients are there, but if they're refusing things, then you need to find things that, so there's a lot more shades of gray.
So true. Oh my gosh, you said that and I right away saw Mom sitting at the table with her cup of coffee.
And dry piece of toast.
Yes.
Totally.
And eventually and as she got older, and I don't know if sensitivities or flavors, she eventually started putting her toast in the coffee. And dipping it in the coffee. And I was like,
maybe to soften
okay. Okay. If that works for you, that works for you. Mm-hmm. But so this is where the signs that I wasn't paying attention to when her change in appetite was there, when there was a shift in medication, and then the shift in appetite. At first it was like, okay, this is a once, this is a twice, okay, now it's consistently every time she takes this medicine, she doesn't want to eat, she doesn't enjoy food like she used to. And so then the question, which I hear often, is what about Ensures, or what about those kind of drinks that are supposed to be packed full? Is that something that, worst case scenario, protein wise, I mean, does that fall into that breakfast, lunch, or dinner kind of thing?
Oral nutrition supplements is what we call them, or oral liquid supplements. So that's your Ensure, your Boost, your Carnation Instant Breakfast, even that they used to. I think they still have them in mix with your milk beverage. They are a tool. I think we need to look at them as a tool in our toolbox. Okay. And so, like any project we're working on, you might want to start with your preferred tools. But if those tools aren't getting the job done, it is a tool that helps provide calories and protein and other nutrients in a sweetened drink, because if our flavor is diminished, our sense of flavor of taste is diminishing. Right. If you notice, they tend to want more sweeter things, older adults. Yes. Because here it is, an adult 60 years and older who has at least one chronic condition which everybody at 60 usually does. High blood pressure, high cholesterol, something of that nature. Yes. And on at least 3 medications, and that can be over the counter too. So your allergy med during seasonal, and say you're on hypertensive medication and then you're on something for cholesterol. That individual, 60 and over, needs 11 times as much salt and 3 times as much sugar to taste that same flavor modality that a younger person would. So it's really stacked against them. And if food is supposed to be enjoyed, we do have to come to a little bit of a compromise in that. Especially, it is worse if someone goes each day without eating and starts to waste away.
Yeah.
Instead of being okay with a middle ground in that.
Yeah. I finally reached a point where it was the quality of life that I was concerned with. And so I loosened up on the strict food, dinner at time with her, and just let her have more. But it was really hard because the excessive sweet and the salt. So wanting to have that salty fried pork chop more often than not, and then polish it off with a bowl of ice cream more often than not. Years in advance, it was like, come on, Mom, let's eat this. You have to have the salad. And then it was like, I don't want this. And then it really was like the child sneaking. So I could hear her in the kitchen, in the pantry, if I had to go upstairs to do laundry. I was like, what are you getting into? And it was that salty sweet combination. And I love salty sweet foods.
Oh, yes.
There's a combination out there for a reason.
Right.
But again, the changes of her palate, and then the sugar just kept increasing more and more and more. And it's just like, oh my gosh, this is like a sugar addict.
Yes. And it can be hard because what they're going to want is the pies, the cookies, and cakes, which those have no nutrients,
Right.
But you could do, so one of my favorite sweets that's more nutrient dense. So go for more dairy based, if dairy's okay. So puddings.
Right.
That are sweet. They're still going to offer some. Yes, there's going to be added sugar in there, but it's like, is there some benefit to those nutrients in there? Yes. Right. What did I say right before this?
But it was better than a slice of pie.
Right. Frozen fruit. So it's cherries, for example, frozen cherries in a baking dish with a bunch of just cinnamon and allspice. You can put all these spices in it that don't add any sugar, and just bake it in the oven for 30 minutes. You can put oatmeal on it if you want, but I just do that and it tastes like a cherry pie without the crust. So I wonder if people can try different frozen fruit bakes, and then when you take it out, if the loved one is still feeling this is not sweet enough, well, then drizzle a little more honey, or drizzle a little Splenda, or drizzle a little sugar, because you're going to use less sugar in that than you are if the pantry has cookies, cakes, ding dongs, and Debbie cakes.
Yeah. The Debbie cakes.
Nothing against Debbie cakes.
I know, nothing against them.
But
I grew
as an
up
example,
on those.
right?
But those were one of those habits that I had to stop doing, and especially when it came to the Nutty Buddies.
I know. I remember the Star
It has
Crunches.
peanut butter. They're healthy, right?
Yes. I mean, all that started to change in the 70s and 80s. That's when that stuff started to come in.
Oh, yeah.
But,
yeah. I had them in my lunchbox almost every day. So once we adjust and we adapt and we understand our protein levels, how do we get to foods that would focus more towards the potassium, the calciums, the vitamin Ds?
Good question. Yeah. So we'll go into the other nutrients in a minute, but the calcium and vitamin D, those are 2 of the 3 nutrients, or I guess maybe of the 4, that increase once we hit 50 and above, and then 70 and above, it's a little bit higher. So we need more of those. Okay. So vitamin D is not in a lot of food sources naturally. It's going to be in some, you can get some in some fish, like fatty fishes, like a little bit. And there's a little bit in some food sources, but not that what's going to get you what you need. Now it's in milk because it's fortified in milk. So milk tends to be a good source of it for us. But I haven't read on this in a while, but several years ago, our recommended level for older adults for vitamin D, a lot of researchers in the vitamin D area felt that was still too low. So I do think vitamin D, calcium, and then B12. But I think talking to healthcare providers and letting them know, hey, I think I need to get on a supplement. I think where caretaker wise, you know, if you're not having 3 dairy foods a day or something fortified with calcium, and a lot of people don't know how to know something's fortified, so that can be confusing.
Yes.
But if you're not having the 3 servings, and you're not having a cup and a half of kale cooked equals 1 glass of milk and calcium. So there's some cool stuff with some greens, but you got to eat a cup and a half of them.
You gotta eat them.
Cooked. But then you need to start looking at where do the supplements come into play to fill the gap? I have to fill the gap for myself.
Me too.
And I think, you know, we build bone until 30 and then it kind of plateaus and then we start losing bone. So it's really important that we make sure we're getting enough calcium. There's some really great websites. I prefer National Institutes of Health.
Yes.
They've got some great fact sheets for consumers or professionals, but what are those foods and how much calcium content are in those? But I would say that goes back to nutrient tracking again and protein tracking. I would say just when you're sitting down, like half your plate, not at breakfast, but half your plate, and like a 9-inch plate, non-starchy vegetables of variety of color.
Okay.
And then a quarter, whatever protein source you want. And that can be a vegetarian one.
Good.
If it happens to be peas, beans, lentils, things like that are protein and a starch, then count it as both. You know, because then the other one's a starch. Now, not necessarily for the older adult, if they're wanting to go for it, but just it's all about plate balance. And if we just look at it like, I need to eat from the rainbow, I need to make sure I have protein in a quarter of that plate, whatever one I choose. Starch is great. Let's choose whole grains, brown rice, quinoa, bulgur wheat. It's fine if it's white rice, but try to choose more of the whole grains more often. You just get so much more nutrients with that. And then that other half, that non-starchy vegetable and whatever you want. So like that's where you're going to get the potassium. All those other nutrients, this is what I love about it. I stopped counting nutrients a long time ago. When I first got into the field, I was analyzing menus. I was analyzing dietary recalls. I was looking at what are people consuming, where do they need to be, and giving advice on that. I just kind of focus more on foods. Like, what does your plate look like at lunch and dinner? Do you need a snack I'm very hypoglycemic.
Me too.
And what are those planned snacks in between that are going to be nutrient dense and not just carb related? And how do we combine that with the protein? You know, all these things to help regulate the rise of your blood sugar, because then that regulates the rise of your insulin. And then that regulates how much fat you store.
Right.
So all of that's connected.
And
how you feel so much better eating whole foods, in their whole form.
Oh, absolutely. Better. The energy that comes from it. I mean, that's the change that I felt right away.
Yes.
That's why I want caregivers to absolutely look at what you're eating. If you're feeling that fatigue, what have you had to eat?
Yeah, I'm so glad you framed it that way, because one of my mentors from 20-something years ago, and she's a professor, she's amazing. She described it this way. And it's true. So if you think of the human physiological body, whether it's muscles, bone, liver, kidneys, lungs, that's all cells, different cells of a certain type, and tons of them that create this organ or structure. Right. It's living. Cells are living. We're living. All of our cells are living. We need to eat living foods.
Yes.
So fruits and vegetables are living cells. They spoil, right? That's what we hate about it. They spoil, but that shows that they are alive and they are degrading. Right. Brown rice, all those living cells. The closer food is to its natural state, the more living cells, the more phytochemicals. When you eat foods that are alive and living, it brings about this energy. Yes. And you don't feel so heavy. Yeah. And cloudy headed. I mean, you will start feeling more vibrant. And it's hard to get into that habit. But start with small goals. Say, once a day, I'm going to add a fruit. Well, look at how much fruit or vegetables you eat. Add one more. See how you can incorporate that and see how you feel. Right.
And a whole idea of variety. That's the one thing I'm struggling with, because adding kale was not a problem for me. Eventually, it was like sauteed kale, raw kale. It was adding to that. What vegetables do I put with it and not get sick of them? After a week or two of, okay, I can't eat another carrot, or I can't eat another zucchini, or I can't.
It does get that way. I mean, Each week, I also think this is helpful for caregivers, parents, working dual income, no kid families. It doesn't matter.
Exactly.
If you are a busy person for whatever the reason, food prep on the weekend is really helpful.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of what we spend our Sunday like, all right, which 2 vegetables are we coming out of the gate with? And we're going to roast them, a big cookie sheet of them, because I like roasted vegetables. I think they taste really good.
Yes.
But that's automatically going to give us leftovers to make our lunches for tomorrow. Then we got our pot of brown rice, and we might, the protein source will like kind of do nightly, like do we want to do fish, or if my husband will grill chicken or what have you. And we love our steak, and I love my fajitas, and I'm a border town girl, so I love tacos and Mexican food. All foods fit, because again, what's the point if we can't enjoy it? It's about enjoying life.
Thank you for saying that.
And food is pleasure.
It's supposed to be, yes.
It is. I think we just, the ratio, we never have to be 100% on anything. If we can try to do good most of the time.
Right.
Look at how many days a week you're doing good, or how many meals a week you're doing good, and just maybe add a couple more on. So start slow. I don't know.
And with it starting slow, I felt like I had to model for my mother. And it sounds really weird, but as she was reverting in age, in mind,
Yeah.
and I'm having to, I kind of fill in those gaps, I felt like, okay, let me just, if I sit here and eat this salad, maybe she'll want to eat a salad. I'll prepare a salad. And she would. But if I made something different and gave her a salad, it was like, I want some of that. I don't want this.
Yes.
So it was just starting small and seeing those little things. And
I think role modeling goes a long way with kids or anybody you're around, any family member you're around.
Oh, yes. Well, my husband might disagree. I've been making him eat a lot more healthy stuff than he probably would care to, but it does start somewhere.
Yeah.
And when the energy comes through, it's like, oh, well, maybe this isn't so bad.
Right.
So one of the other areas that I didn't understand and didn't realize that Meals on Wheels does, Meals on Wheels, is their specialty diets. I didn't understand that until my mother was on hospice and she needed special care for her renal diet. That's when someone in hospice said, well, did you know that Meals on Wheels has specialty diet meal plans? And I thought, wait, what? Mm-hmm. They do what? Why didn't I know this before? Can you talk a little bit about the specialty diets?
Absolutely.
That are available?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, the renal diet is the hardest one to get right. That it is not easy. So I'm really glad so home delivered meal programs across the nation, some of us are called Meals on Wheels. We're Meals on Wheels Central Texas. Some of us might be under a different unit. So if wherever you are in the country, for example, my grandma was in Silver City, New Mexico, when I started to realize, okay, I need to see if there's a home delivered meal organization in her area. Mm-hmm. If you Google Meals on Wheels Silver City, New Mexico, nothing's going to show up.
Oh, right.
So the search term is home delivered meals or congregate meals, because those are your senior centers.
Good to know.
Those are all founded under the Older Americans Act legislation from the 60s. And so they are ubiquitous across the nation. You can find them anywhere.
Good to know.
So now not all of us have medically tailored meals. Your bigger urban, we're starting to move in that direction. We're kind of some of the spearheaders nationally in that area. But so here in Austin, we have, first of all, I approach all of our diet. I make them all diabetes friendly and heart friendly. Okay. I don't have a diabetic diet. There's really no such thing as a diabetic diet because it's so individualized. So how do you feed a large few thousand population with different needs?
Right.
So we have to take somewhat of a standardized approach, but all of them are diabetes friendly in that sense. They're heart friendly. And then what we do is we take those, we call that our general health. That's for prevention. That's for management. But if there's other situations, let's say there's Parkinson's and dexterity and arthritis issues. So they need a soft meal, or they need a soft meal because they need items instead of like a whole apple. Oh, right. They'll need applesauce or a cupped fruit that's softer. Or let's say they have really quite the bit of dysphagia, which is difficulty in swallowing, then we can do a pureed of any of those. Mm-hmm. We can also do a digestive friendly, which really I would love to make 3 different diets because there's so many different things in the GI tract that you can address, but we are limited to resources as well. So we
course.
rope them all into one, but it's basically any, if it's heartburn or acid reflux, foods that are irritating to that, all the way down to flatulence and pain from like gas producing foods, cruciferous vegetables and beans. So we can remove those foods like spices, even the ones that are not hot, like cinnamon, things like that, and chocolate. So the things that relax this sphincter here are alcohol, chocolate, spices, high fat foods, and those are like the main things. Peppermint. So there's a few things that this sphincter that keeps that stomach acid in, it relaxes.
I'm so glad you said that.
So if anybody's experiencing heartburn, that needs to be considered. Now, if you can start where you have it earlier in the day, but if you're noticing heartburn in the day, that might be something you want to look at.
So I'm hearing I have to cut back on my chocolate intake.
All foods fit, but weigh out how bad is my heartburn, or I'll have heartburn once or twice a week instead.
Well, and I only say that because it wasn't ever really an issue for me until I started this grieving process and losing my appetite. And when I was eating the little bits that I was eating, I was also craving the sugars more. And so I was giving myself these little rewards of you made it through the day, or you accomplished and you stayed focused. You didn't just throw your hands up and go lay down or something, or sit under the tree and just gaze. So it was like, good job. Here's some chocolate. Here's a little bit more. Oh, you haven't had that much. Here's just a little bit more. And then I started feeling, and then after dinner, dinner's done. Time for the dessert, a little sweet. And I stopped with all of the, like actually having a bowl of ice cream or a slice of cake or all that. I don't do that. I just have just enough for the flavor to be satisfied afterwards. But that just enough turned into a little bit more.
Right. It is hard to yes, can we, what helps me is I put a little goal chart. If you're, kind of some of your habits have kind of gotten a little out of whack, you can get a goal chart and say, well, 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, I am not going to have that piece of chocolate.
Right.
Or I can have that piece of chocolate and it's got to be 3 days a week. And then I think it helps you see yourself as accountable,
Yes.
but I agree with you. I always have a little bit of chocolate at my house because it makes me happy. And I love to get the dark chocolate covered almonds,
Exactly.
So there's ways to incorporate some nuts or things like that. But I love a Snickers bar too, but I just can't have that too much, but
No.
But I still have it every now and then.
Which is that trying to tell mom no, and then I would sneak away and have mine.
Right.
That was something I had to kind of get used to.
I think
just deal with
caregivers are probably in that moment where, you're caring for this person whose health is degrading, suffering. They need you there for that point.
Yes.
So you're wanting to give them the very best of everything.
Exactly.
Everything it can be. But we don't self-care.
And then we don't turn it around on us.
And we're like, oh, well, we're younger. We've got time. It starts now. All these things set in, they're all chronic. This is all over time.
Yes.
This isn't an overnight thing.
No, it's not.
So
it's not. And then we expect the overnight fixes of this heartburn's here because of some sort of food that's causing it. And so I'm just going to take a whole bunch of Tums.
Yeah.
And over the years that my mother did that, and then eventually having kidney stones or gallbladder stones.
They're high in calcium, which can be a good supplement. But if you are overloading, it can also prevent absorption of other nutrients.
Yes.
And if, Tums is good, I have it when I need it. But if you think of it, it neutralizes the acid. That acid is helpful in other nutrient absorption. So when you continue to smother that acid, it can't do its good part either.
That's interesting. So every time we think we're helping in that respect, it's not entirely helping, or we goes overboard.
It's the overboard piece. When they say, even good thing, too much of a good thing can be bad, and that's true.
Yes. I've learned that the hard way yet again, because just recently my A1C was rising. And I thought, how in the world? I'm eating less calories. I'm exercising more, just trying to get those endorphins going and keep on a positive track. How in the world? Well, come to find out, I was eating, again, too many, the overindulgence of sweet potatoes. Absolutely love them. But instead of having that half a cup of a serving, I was probably eating a whole sweet potato and then some in my smoothies, in my lunch salads, and then again in my dinner putting it in the air fryer.
Right. You know, it's interesting about diabetes and blood sugar control in general. Even the so we can have we should have carbohydrates. You know, that's all our brain functions on it.
Yes.
It's important to choose the right carbohydrates, but it does, even if it's the right carbohydrate, especially with diabetes, the amount is still critical. Like,
yes.
the body doesn't discern at that point from a blood sugar standpoint of just how that insulin response is going to be. Some of the other diets, aside from the digestive, we do have the renal friendly. So I wanted to bring that back into the just. Yeah.
Yes, and then that's what I was shared, and it was just a matter of logistics, getting the deliveries and how they were going to handle it. And of course, at the time I found out this, my mother was in memory care, so there was a bit of a challenge to get food delivered to her, and them actually handled that in-house.
She was in a facility?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I know we deliver to some areas that are either group buildings or of some sort.
Right.
Yes. So what our eligibility looks at is those activities of daily living, like that transfer ability, instrumental activities, shopping for themselves or cooking for themselves, doing laundry, keeping the house clean. When those things are challenging, those are our eligibility criteria. So there's a certain scoring to it, but that's what brings people on our services, those older adults or people with disabilities that are having a little trouble with that. And this already prepared, renal friendly or diabetes friendly, just medically tailored meal. Older adults, they have trouble getting to the store, getting their food, coming back, preparing it, being able to stand that long, and then eat. It is such a chore. It is such a task. It is so much. So how can they stay compliant with anything healthy or any diet?
Exactly.
And once it gets to diabetes, then you're really strict on, you cannot skip meals, So how can they comply if they don't have the means to obtain their tools, all those tools? So I take great pride in the fact that a human being comes to the door, it does that informal safety check, provides that medically tailored meal. If they notice something is wrong, so if there's not a caretaker there, they, all volunteers and paid drivers are trained to call back, and we escalate issues and can get a well check and things like that. So our Meals on Wheels program provides the medical nutrition therapy, in my opinion, from those medically tailored meals to help manage conditions. But that human at the door is addressing social isolation, because you don't have to have a relationship to address social isolation. You can just be that person that cares. In that one study you mentioned, our clients said, so many of them, and this was legit research where it wasn't our media friendly clients.
All right.
It was the real deal. And it was great because they said, no, I don't know my volunteer's name, but I know they care about me. And I feel safer because they check on me. And of those that had high fall risk, based on a validated instrument we measured, 75% of those at high fall risk were afraid of falling, said they felt safer because Meals on Wheels was coming to the door. So that reassurance. So if you are a caretaker and you have a job still and you need somebody to come in the middle of the day. Our meal deliveries from, 11 to 1. So, give us a call. Let's see if your loved one's available. By the time you need a caregiver, and there's that component, they likely do. In fact, caregivers can sometimes get on meal service just for being a caretaker, because we have that understanding, and our funders have that understanding that caretakers need to be cared for too. So wherever you sit nationally, look up a home delivered meal program, see what they have. Even if they don't have medically tailored meals, there's enough in the literature showing that they help older adults remain in their home longer. They consume more nutrients, because when it's hot and ready, it really does help.
That's the goal, is to keep them in their home as long as possible. Because I know my mother did not want to go to a community until life evolved that way. And had I known this information early on as a caregiver, I can't tell you how many times I drove myself crazy, stressed out, because I was trying to make it to her house, cook some meals, put some leftovers in the refrigerator. Here's one warm for lunch, or and the leftovers for dinner, or here's one for dinner and leftovers for lunch the next day. Right. And that gets to be very stressful, on top of getting there and seeing that the meals weren't eaten. Well, because getting to the kitchen and reheating them in the microwave, that's
still a process.
That's energy, and that's a process. And so that's another, I'm so glad you said that, because that's another area that I've heard other caregivers say, well, I call on them, I check on them, and they answer the phone and they say they're fine. I was like, yeah, but did you get eyes on them to see what fine looks like?
Exactly. Because they're not going to want you to worry about that, and they're not going to want to let you know.
Right.
Or they don't even, we adapt to pain and difficulty as humans. And I don't even think sometimes they realize the extent of what they accept what they're dealing with, and they don't want to burden anybody.
And that's what she didn't want to bother me,
Right.
especially if I was working. She didn't want to bother me to have me come over. And then, but once I came over, she didn't really want me to leave. When it came time after 2-3 hours went by and was like, okay, I've got to go home. I'm going to have dinner at home. Oh, you're leaving already?
Mm-hmm.
And that
that's so
felt,
hard.
it made me feel like, okay, well, I spent some time, but now I feel guilty because I've got to leave. I need to leave. But I'll come back the next, and I kept coming back more and more. But seeing what was being, what she was actually eating on her kitchen island, the wrappers and the containers that were left over, because thankfully she was recycling, and I got to see all the containers of things, and I'm like, oh, we've got to change this stuff up.
Yes. I mean, if it is mostly like processed packaged non-living foods, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. It's good that they're getting calories, and of course, more nutrient foods would help the situation. But it is tough, especially when no one's there. Especially when they're, yeah. So it's kind of like, what do we have in the home for them to grab?
Right.
What do we make available? It's hard to take it all away. I have kids. It's really hard to take it all away.
Oh, I know.
You know what I mean?
I know.
So it's hard. There's not a perfect solution. I think you just gotta find what works for your individual diet.
No, and that's where adding the fruits and vegetables, the raw. So having that out available if she's going to make it to the kitchen to get her coffee and toast, then she can at least make it to the kitchen and see a bowl of fruit on the island and say, oh, maybe I'll have the banana with my toast, or I'll have, I don't know, an orange, mango. I mean, I had to dive into what food gave me what nutrient to kind of fill in the gap. So I wasn't taking a ton of supplements. And I know she didn't want to have to take more medicines either, but sometimes she didn't want the food that was her medicine.
Right.
So the socializing, that is one area that I love, that Meals on Wheels doesn't just provide food. They provide the person who's bringing the food.
The human touch.
The human touch.
The human connection. And
the eyes on that person.
The eyes and ears.
So unfortunately, when people have they are the working family, the sandwich generation, right?
Yes.
You have kids, you have your parents, and you're trying to get between the two. And so a lot of times it is that quick phone call that says, oh, I checked on them because now I have to go home and I have a younger child to deal with, or children to deal with. And then we don't realize how many days go by without having that check on, the actual eyes on physical in the house.
And that attribute is common throughout all home delivered meal programs. I mean, we are exploring doing some different times where we might deliver, but there will always be a middle of the day, checking on our neighbors, delivering that meal.
Good. So good. Again, things that I wish I knew like years ago, but thankfully I know this now going forward. So another thing that I was wanting to know about, you mentioned earlier, I kind of want to circle back, the absorption of B12.
Yeah.
And getting that. And so trying to find the balance of getting meat-based protein versus plant-based protein. I felt like I had to push towards the meat because I needed the B12, but then I had that confusion of, well, this is good. They say this is good, and now this is bad, and this is good.
It's so confusing, isn't it? Oh,
one day eggs are good, the next day eggs are bad, and the next day coffee's good and the coffee's bad, and same thing with the beef. And I'm glad you said the specific with loin, because red meat is bad on some scales, and chicken is good, or lean.
It's difficult and it is complex. It gets very confusing to consumer. What did you say in the beginning to prompt me?
So
there?
the B12, getting the B12
Yes. Let's talk about B12. So B12 is naturally occurring in all animal products. So that's any type of meat, milk, eggs. So all that has B12 in it. The problem is once we hit 50, so here's another age one. Once we hit 50, we start to absorb less of it from that protein source. So the way it's kind of bound as a molecule, there's a few things that aren't happening the same way once we hit 50 and beyond. It's a reduction in gastric acid for some people. So that acid helps break it apart. But there's these intrinsic factor, all these scientific soldiers in there that help break it free and then transport it to the gut and get it where it needs to be. All shifts, and we don't do it very well as we age. So the National Academy of Sciences actually recommends that once you hit 50, you should consume your B12 as a supplement. This is when you're here, supplement, right, or in fortified foods. So this is where that fortified food piece comes in. Fortified means that they add a nutrient in a food that was not there before. So vitamin D does not naturally occur in cow's milk. It's not in breast milk. That's why if you breastfeed, you got to add vitamin D to your baby's mouth every day. So fortification of foods is a great public health intervention. So it was there because we started getting rickets back in the day. So boom, fortified there. The way you can tell other foods that are fortified, like one of my favorites, they are packaged foods, but they've got a lot of nutrients in them. So certain cereals. So Total, for example, is an easy one that everybody recognizes nationally. It's got 100%. It's like taking a multivitamin. And the form of B12 they put in fortified foods is the crystalline form, which means it's not bound to that other part of the molecule. In a natural animal producing food, it's this way. So if it's already separated, we can absorb it. So so the supplements come in crystalline form, fortified foods come in crystalline form. There's some really good cereals that are heavy on the whole grains in a good way. And the way you can tell, because they're not always going to say the word fortified, look on the nutrition fact label. Skip all the way towards the bottom till it shows things like iron in the percentage. Okay. Which those are, our nutrition fact label needs some help. Oh, yes. That's not very helpful. Anyway, but you'll see B12 and a percentage. If you see B12 listed on there, they added B12. Okay. Any other nutrient you see there and you see those percentages, 20, 30, whatever, this food is fortified. Okay. You can look at the ingredient list and you will see the nutrient added later on. They will have that as an ingredient. Your dairy replacements, soy milk, almond milk, rice milk, all those. So, you get a lot from cow's milk. You get the protein and the nutrients. When you go to soy, you get you get protein there. You only get those nutrients you get nutrients, but remember calcium and vitamin D are important. They don't naturally come in soy milk. So they need to fortify it. So you will see 2 different soy milks, 2 different rice milks right there. And you'll see one that's the normal one. And you see one, and it usually will have a little banner, a little yellow banner. It'll say fortified with or enriched with. Right. And they'll put the nutrients, C and D. Orange juice is the same way. Always get it where it says calcium and vitamin D fortified, because you're basically, whatever you're consuming, you're adding up. Instead of taking a pill, you're eating something or consuming something that has other nutrients in it. So that's kind of the concept. And that's the drawback, is that you have our loved ones that are often on fixed income, and they approach that food scarcity. And so they get to a grocery store if they're able to, or if they have someone shopping, and it's just get the cheapest version. And so they're not getting the fortified, they're just getting something that is the least expensive. That I feel that in that process they're trying. They are trying. They're doing what they can and what's available to them and what their means provide for. But also not knowing that if they do have an option, and they are able to go for the fortified version, get the enriched, get the fortified version, as opposed to, because then you're not missing out on the key pieces that you're now not getting from that source. Because here's another problem that
I, again, didn't know until I needed to know. My mother had to have her gallbladder removed.
Mm-hmm.
And when she had that removed, I didn't understand the absorption of food and how that played a part. And even if she was eating some things that gave her those nutrients, she had to have those things and supplements to get enough. And that's kind of the issue that I'm facing now too. I have to have these areas, protein, carbs, fats, and then the supplements to go to balance it out. But that's not something that we know. It's like we're so far removed from health class in high school, and we don't realize that how the body works with the absorption factors.
Yeah. And we, when research that, is reviewed and then these big public recommendations come out, that means there's like not a lot of question. It's pretty convincing, compelling evidence. But when most of the nutrients studied in studies and the benefits of certain nutrients for health, the medium of delivery is through foods. So we are better off getting nutrients from food and then fill in the gaps. So what I do notice from people is they don't even consider food as that delivery vehicle of those, because it's hard to know what's in what. And I get it. But so to me, it's like, are you eating a variety of color? It doesn't have to be all right there. Over the course of the week, did you have a red, orange, green, yellow, white? Right. And just go through it. And then if 5 to 9 servings of produce a day is really the goal. This is not someone who has appetite struggles.
Right.
This is the caretaker who's got an appetite. I mean, how many of us really have 5 to 9 servings?
Yeah.
And when you think of, if you can get to 5 though, that's great. And then what does that 5 look like in the day? Can't all be bananas, can't all be white. Okay. And it shouldn't all be fruit. We really need to bring in the non-starchy vegetables.
Absolutely.
But so take a multivitamin, or if you know some specifics. So obviously if you work with somebody and your specific needs, that's different. But from a general advice, eat from the rainbow. You can take a multivitamin to top things off, but I think the big areas of true supplement talk with a physician and doctor is the calcium, vitamin D, B12. Those are the 3 top ones. Omega-3 specifically, DHA and EPA, if we're not big salmon eaters, is helpful for some populations. So,
Good to know. All valuable. See, I
wanted
this information out there for a very specific reason. Just knowing what I experienced with my mother and the things that I know now that would have been so beneficial before and would have reduced a lot of stress. Thank you for sharing this information.
You're so welcome.
And so for the listeners that actually want to get involved with Meals on Wheels and become volunteers possibly, how do they go about doing that? How do they contact?
Sure. So I would search home delivered meal program in whatever city and state you're in, and you will see things pop up. If they're nonprofit organizations, they will have a website and they will likely utilize volunteers. There's some that don't have volunteers, but most of us have volunteers. In the Austin, Central Texas area, mealsonwheelscentraltexas.org. There's an area in there to learn all the different ways you can volunteer, because we have other programs too if a lunch menu or if a lunch hour is difficult to do.
Nice. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
This is valuable information, and ladies and gentlemen, this is something that as a caregiver, had I known this before, my health probably would have been in a different situation during caregiving, and especially after. Knowledge is always power, and for those grieving caregivers out there, my heart goes out to you. But don't forget, self-care is still vital, even if your loved one's not with you anymore. But other than that, thank you for joining us today. I hope this information gave you more food for thought. And if you would like some more information, you can always go to proactivecaregiver.com for some other blogs and podcast information similar to this. And ladies and gentlemen, until next time, be proactive. Take care. Thank you for joining today. To find out more about becoming a proactive caregiver yourself, visit proactivecaregiver.com and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Music provided by www.joystock.org. The Proactive Caregiver is produced by Canon Light Media